The helicopter blades cut through the cold English air. Inside, Sarah Chen sat quietly with her gear bag between her boots. She wore the standard Navy SEAL uniform, her hair pulled back tight in a regulation bun. Through the small window, she could see the green fields of England getting closer. This was Hereford, home to the British SAS, one of the most elite military units in the world. Sarah was 32 years old. She had been in the military for 12 years. For the past 8 years, she had been a Navy SEAL sniper. Getting here had not been easy. In fact, nothing in her career had been easy. The helicopter touched down with a bump. Sarah grabbed her bag and stepped out into the wind. The base was exactly what she expected. Clean, organized, professional. There were already other soldiers standing in formation near the landing pad. Some were American SEALs like her. Others were British SAS soldiers. She walked toward the group, her boots crunching on the gravel. As she got closer, she noticed some of the British soldiers looking at her. Their eyes moved from her face to her uniform and back again. She knew that look. She had seen it 1,000 times before. A tall British soldier stood near the front of the group. He had short gray hair and a face that showed many years in the sun and wind. His uniform had several badges and patches that marked him as someone with lots of experience. His name tag read, Hartley. He was watching her approach with his arms crossed over his chest. When Sarah joined the formation, she heard him speak to the soldier next to him. His voice was loud enough for her to hear. "Brilliant," he said with a smirk. "The Americans sent us a woman to teach us about shooting." Some of the other British soldiers laughed quietly. Sarah did not react. She kept her face calm and neutral. She had heard comments like this since the very beginning of her military career. When she first tried to join the SEALs, men had laughed at her. During the brutal training known as BUD-S, instructors had bet money that she would quit in the first week. Other trainees had whispered that the Navy was only letting her try because of politics, not because she belonged there. But Sarah had not quit. She had completed every single exercise. She had carried the boats, swam in the freezing ocean, and survived Hell Week when many strong men had given up. She had earned her SEAL trident through pure determination and skill. Nothing had been given to her. Everything had been earned. Now she stood on this British base, one of 12 Americans selected for a special training program. This was a joint operation, a chance for American and British snipers to learn from each other. Sarah had been personally chosen by her commanding officer. He had told her she was the best sniper in their unit. He had told her to go and represent the SEALs well. But standing here now, listening to the quiet laughter of men who had already judged her without knowing anything about her, Sarah felt the familiar weight of having to prove herself all over again. The commanding officer, a British colonel, stepped forward to address the group. He was an older man with a stern face and a voice that commanded attention. "Welcome to Hereford," he said. "You are here for the next 2 weeks as part of the Anglo-American Sniper Exchange Program. You will train together, learn from each other, and push each other to be better. I expect nothing but the highest level of professionalism from all of you." He went on to explain the schedule. Early morning physical training, classroom work on ballistics and weather calculations, afternoon range time for shooting practice, evening tactical simulations. It would be intense, he said. It would challenge even the most experienced among them. After the briefing, the soldiers broke into smaller groups to get their barracks assignments and settle in. Sarah picked up her bag and followed the signs to the female quarters. She was the only woman in the program, which meant she would have a small room to herself while the men shared larger bunk rooms. As she walked across the base, she passed groups of soldiers talking and laughing. She heard snippets of conversation. Some were discussing previous missions. Others were making plans for the evening meal. A few were talking about the training program and what they expected from it. Sarah found her room and pushed open the door. It was small and simple. A single bed, a locker, a desk, and a window that looked out over the training grounds. She set her bag on the bed and began to unpack. Everything had its place. Her uniforms went in the locker, properly folded. Her cleaning kit for her rifle went on the desk. Her personal items, which were few, went into the small drawer. She moved with practiced efficiency. In the field, organization could mean the difference between life and death. She had learned to keep everything in order, to always know exactly where her equipment was, to waste no time or motion. As she unpacked, she thought about the mission that had brought her here. The military wanted to strengthen the relationship between American and British Special Operations Forces. They wanted their best snipers to share knowledge and techniques. Sarah knew she was good at her job, very good, but she also knew that most of the men here would not believe that until they saw it with their own eyes. She had 89 confirmed kills in combat. That number was classified, known only to her superiors and a few others with high-level clearance. She had served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, and several other locations she could not talk about. She had made shots that other snipers said were impossible. She had saved countless lives by eliminating threats before they could harm her fellow soldiers. But none of that mattered here. Not yet. Here she was just another new arrival. Here, she would have to prove herself again. That evening, all the soldiers gathered in the mess hall for dinner. Sarah got her food and looked for a place to sit. Most of the tables were already full of men talking loudly, sharing stories, building the camaraderie that soldiers naturally formed. She spotted an empty seat at the end of one table and headed toward it. As she sat down, the conversation at the table quieted slightly. The men glanced at her but continued talking. They were discussing a training exercise from earlier in the day, before the Americans had arrived. Sarah ate quietly, listening but not joining in. Across the room, she could see Hartley sitting with a group of British soldiers. He was telling a story, using his hands to gesture, making his friends laugh. Every so often, his eyes would drift toward Sarah's table. Each time, that same smirk would appear on his face. Sarah had dealt with men like Hartley before. Men who had been in the military their whole adult lives. Men who were good at their jobs and knew it. Men who believed that certain roles were meant for men only, and that women were a distraction at best, a liability at worst. She could have been angry. She could have been hurt. But she had learned long ago that anger and hurt were wasted emotions. They did not change minds. They did not earn respect. Only action did that. Only performance mattered. After dinner, Sarah returned to her room. She spent an hour cleaning her rifle, checking every component, making sure everything was perfect. This rifle had been with her through multiple deployments. She knew its quirks, its tendencies, the way it responded in different weather conditions. It was an extension of herself. When the rifle was clean and properly stored, she opened her laptop and reviewed the training schedule for the next day. They would start with a 5-mile run in full gear. Then there would be classroom instruction on long-range shooting theory. In the afternoon, they would go to the range for their first live fire exercises. Sarah made notes in her small notebook. She wrote down wind conditions she had observed during the day. She noted the temperature and humidity. She made calculations for how bullets would behave in this environment, compared to the desert conditions she was used to. This was how she had become the best. Not through natural talent alone, though she had good eyesight and steady hands, but through endless preparation. Through studying every variable. Through practicing until muscle memory took over and thinking became unnecessary. She set her alarm for 4:30 in the morning. She wanted to be up before the others, to have time to prepare herself mentally for the day ahead. As she lay in bed in the darkness, she thought about tomorrow. She knew Hartley would be watching her. She knew others would be judging every move she made. Let them watch, she thought. Let them judge. They would see what they would see. Sarah had stopped trying to convince people with words long ago. She let her rifle do the talking now. And her rifle never lied. Outside her window, the English night was quiet and cold. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear voices and laughter from the barracks where the men were still awake, probably sharing stories and getting to know each other. Sarah did not mind being alone. She had learned to be comfortable with solitude. In many ways, it was her greatest strength. Tomorrow would be the first test. Not an official one, but a test nonetheless. She would be measured against these British soldiers who had trained their whole careers. She would be compared to the American men on her team, who were all bigger and stronger than her. But Sarah knew something they did not know yet. She knew that being a great sniper was not about size or strength. It was about patience, about calculation, about the ability to control your breathing, slow your heartbeat, and squeeze a trigger at exactly the right moment. It was about seeing what others missed and making shots that others could not make. The alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning. Sarah was already awake. She had been lying in bed for 10 minutes, mentally preparing for the day. She got up, dressed in her physical training uniform, and headed out into the cold morning darkness. The first 3 days of training were exactly what she had expected. Hard, demanding, designed to test every aspect of a sniper's abilities. The days started with intense physical training, 5-mile runs carrying full gear, obstacle courses, strength exercises. The instructors pushed everyone to their limits. Sarah kept up with the pace. She was smaller than the men, but she was strong and had incredible endurance. Years of SEAL training had taught her how to push through pain and exhaustion. She finished every run, completed every exercise, and never complained, but she was careful not to stand out too much. She did not try to be the first to finish. She did not show off or draw attention to herself. She stayed in the middle of the group, performing well but not exceptionally. This was a strategy she had learned over the years. Drawing too much attention early only created problems. After the morning physical training, the soldiers would shower, eat breakfast, and then head to the classroom. Here, British and American instructors taught advanced concepts, wind calculation methods, how temperature and humidity affected bullet flight, mathematical formulas for adjusting aim at different distances, the science behind being a great sniper. Sarah already knew most of this material. She had studied it for years and applied it in real combat situations, but she sat quietly, took notes, and listened. Sometimes she learned small new details. Other times she simply reinforced what she already knew. The afternoons were spent on the shooting range. This was where snipers practiced their craft. Long-range targets were set up at various distances. 300 yards, 500 yards, 800 yards, sometimes even further. Each sniper would take turns shooting, trying to hit smaller and smaller targets. Sarah performed competently during these sessions. She hit most of her targets, but not all of them. She made a few intentional misses, shots that were close but not perfect. She wanted to blend in with the group, to be seen as good but not exceptional. Hartley, on the other hand, made sure everyone noticed his shooting. He was genuinely skilled. His shots were consistently accurate. After each good shot, he would stand up and make comments. "That is how it is done," he would say. Or, "Years of experience, that is what you are seeing." Several times he made comments directed at Sarah. When she missed a target, which she did deliberately, he would shake his head. "Difficult shot, that one," he would say in a tone that suggested he did not think she belonged there. "Takes a lot of upper body strength to hold steady at that distance." Sarah said nothing in response. She just nodded and moved on to the next shot. She had learned long ago that arguing was pointless. Words changed nothing. Only results mattered. The other soldiers noticed Hartley's behavior. Some of the British soldiers seemed uncomfortable with his comments. A few of the American SEALs who knew Sarah's reputation exchanged knowing glances. They wanted to say something to defend her, but Sarah had asked them before they arrived to let her handle things herself. Master Chief Rodriguez, one of the American team leaders, had pulled Sarah aside on the second day. "You want me to talk to him?" he had asked, nodding toward Hartley. "Put him in his place?" Sarah had shaken her head. "Let it go. This is not worth making into a problem. You are better than this, Sarah, better than all of us. You should not have to deal with his disrespect." "I have dealt with worse," Sarah had replied simply. "It does not matter what he thinks. It only matters what I can do." By the third day, a pattern had formed. Hartley continued his subtle campaign of mockery. He would offer to carry equipment for Sarah, suggesting it was too heavy for her. He would give her unsolicited advice on shooting techniques, speaking to her like she was a beginner. He would make jokes at her expense that were just barely within the bounds of professional conduct. Sarah remained calm through all of it. She focused on her training, learned what she could from the instructors, and waited. She knew that an opportunity would come. Situations like this always reached a breaking point. She just had to be patient. On the morning of the fourth day, the instructors gathered all the soldiers for a special announcement. The lead instructor, a British major with over 20 years of experience, stood before them with a serious expression. "Today we will be conducting a special exercise," he said, "a test of skill that separates the good snipers from the truly exceptional ones. A cold bore shot at 1,000 yards. A murmur went through the group. A cold bore shot meant no practice rounds, no warm-up, no chance to adjust your scope based on where previous shots landed. You got one bullet and one chance. At 1,000 yards, which was more than half a mile, even the smallest error in calculation would mean a complete miss. The target is a 6-inch circle," the major continued. "Wind conditions are challenging today, gusting and unpredictable. Temperature dropped overnight, which will affect your ballistics. This is not an easy shot even under ideal conditions. He explained the rules. Each sniper would be called up individually. They could take as much time as they needed to prepare and aim. But once they fired, that was it. No second chances. Their shot would be recorded and measured. The closest to center would win. This exercise will count toward your final evaluation, the major said. It will also demonstrate who among you has truly mastered the art of long-range precision shooting. The soldiers were given 30 minutes to prepare. Sarah went to her equipment and began her pre-shot routine. She checked her rifle thoroughly, even though she had cleaned it the night before. She verified that her scope was properly mounted and zeroed. She gathered her data book, which contained pages of notes about wind conditions, temperatures, and how her rifle performed under different circumstances. Around her, other soldiers were doing the same. Some were nervous, talking quickly as they prepared. Others were quiet and focused. Hartley was holding court with a group of British soldiers, explaining his strategy for the shot with confidence. When the 30 minutes were up, the soldiers gathered at the shooting range. A large target had been set up 1,000 yards downrange. Through binoculars, the 6-inch circle looked impossibly small. The wind was blowing across the range in gusts, making the flags snap and flutter unpredictably. The major called up the first shooter. He was a British corporal, young but talented. He took his position, spent several minutes reading the wind and adjusting his scope, and then fired. The shot was measured at 8 inches from center. Respectable but not exceptional. One by one, other soldiers took their turns. Some shots were close, others were far off target. The wind was making things difficult for everyone. Even experienced snipers were struggling with the conditions. Then Hartley was called up. He walked to the firing line with his characteristic swagger. He took his time, more time than anyone else had taken. He consulted his data book multiple times. He checked the wind flags at various points along the range. He made tiny adjustments to his scope, turning the knobs with careful precision. The other soldiers watched in silence. Hartley was known for his skill, and he was clearly trying to put on a demonstration. Finally, after what seemed like several minutes, he settled into position behind his rifle. His breathing slowed. His body became completely still. The seconds ticked by. Then the rifle fired, the sharp crack echoing across the range. The range officer, watching through a powerful spotting scope, immediately called out the result. 3 inches from center. Excellent shot. Hartley stood up with a satisfied smile. Several British soldiers clapped or nodded in approval. 3 inches at 1,000 yards was genuinely impressive, especially in these wind conditions. Hartley walked back to the group, accepting congratulations from his fellow SAS soldiers. Then he turned and looked directly at Sarah. His smile widened into that familiar smirk. He walked over to where she was standing, his eyes full of condescension and challenge. "Want to try?" he asked. His tone made it clear he did not expect her to do well. "I know it is a bit far for you Americans, especially for someone your size." The other soldiers went quiet. They could all hear the disrespect in his voice. This was more than just a challenge about shooting. This was Hartley making it clear that he did not think Sarah belonged here, that he did not think she could match his skill. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. She did not smile. She did not show any emotion at all. She simply picked up her rifle and walked toward the firing line. Behind her, she could hear whispers. Some soldiers were betting she would not even hit the target. Others were hoping she would do well just to knock Hartley down a peg. The American SEALs who knew her reputation were quiet, but they were watching with intense interest. Sarah reached the firing line and set down her equipment. Unlike Hartley, she did not spend long minutes preparing. She did not make a show of her calculations or adjustments. She had already done most of her preparation in her mind before being called up. She glanced at the wind flags. She felt the breeze on her face. She made 2 small adjustments to her scope. Quick turns of the knobs based on calculations she had already completed. Then she got into position behind her rifle. The rest of the soldiers took their turns at the 1,000-yard shot, but nobody was paying much attention anymore. All eyes kept drifting back to Sarah. She had returned to her spot and was calmly cleaning her rifle as if nothing special had happened. As if she had not just made a perfect shot that most of these experienced snipers could not make even on their best day. When the exercise was finished, the major stood before the group to announce the results. But everyone already knew who had won. Lieutenant Commander Chen has achieved the highest score, he said, his voice carrying a note of respect that had not been there before. A perfect center hit. Well done. There was applause, though some of it was hesitant. The British soldiers were processing what they had seen. Some looked impressed. Others looked confused. A few looked embarrassed that they had underestimated her so badly. The training day continued, but something had changed. During the afternoon exercises, soldiers who had ignored Sarah before were now watching her more carefully. When she took a shooting position, others would pause to observe her technique. When she made adjustments to her equipment, people took notice, but Hartley was noticeably quiet. He went through the rest of the day's training in a daze. His usual confident commentary was gone. Several times Sarah noticed him staring at her from across the range, his expression troubled and thoughtful. That evening, Sarah was in the equipment room doing what she always did after a day of shooting. She had her rifle completely disassembled on a clean mat. Each piece was laid out in precise order. She was cleaning every component with careful attention, making sure everything was perfect. This was her ritual. After every training day and after every mission, she cleaned her rifle. It was not just about maintenance. It was meditation. It was a way to process the day, to think through what had happened, to prepare mentally for what was coming next. She heard footsteps behind her but did not turn around. She knew who it was before he spoke. That shot, Hartley said. His voice was different now. The swagger was gone. The mockery had disappeared. That was not luck. It was not really a question, but Sarah answered anyway. No, she said simply, still focused on her rifle. It was not luck. How long have you been doing this? 12 years in the military. 8 as a SEAL. There was a long pause. Sarah could hear Hartley shifting his weight, uncomfortable but determined to have this conversation. She continued cleaning her rifle, giving him time to find his words. I have been hearing things, he said finally. Since you arrived, there have been rumors. The instructors would not tell us anything about you, just that you were highly qualified. But some of the other American soldiers, they talk. Word gets around. Sarah did not respond. She was applying oil to the bolt assembly with careful precision. They say you have more confirmed kills than anyone in your unit, Hartley continued. They say you made an impossible shot in Afghanistan that saved an entire platoon. They say enemy fighters in 3 different countries have a name for you. They call you the Ghost because you are the last thing they never see. Sarah finally looked up from her work. She met Hartley's eyes directly. His face showed genuine curiosity now, mixed with embarrassment and something that might have been admiration. I do not talk about my deployments, Sarah said quietly. What happened in combat stays in combat. Those missions are classified. The people I served with, the things we did, the reasons we did them, that is not for casual conversation. I understand, Hartley said. He pulled up a nearby chair and sat down, his posture less rigid now. But I need to know. That shot today, have you made shots like that before? Under pressure? Sarah considered whether to answer. She did not like talking about herself. She did not need validation or recognition. But she could see that Hartley was genuinely trying to understand, trying to reconcile what he had assumed about her with what he had witnessed. Yes, she said. Many times. In combat, the conditions are usually worse than what we had today. You are being shot at. Your teammates are depending on you. There is no time for long calculations or multiple adjustments. You have to see the target, make the calculations instantly and take the shot. One chance. Lives depend on it. How many times have you done that? Enough times that I stopped counting. Before Hartley could ask another question, Master Chief Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall, with arms the size of most people's legs. He had been a SEAL for 18 years and had served on dozens of missions with Sarah. When he saw Hartley, a slow smile spread across his face. Finally figured out who she is, Sergeant Major? Rodriguez said. He leaned against the doorframe, clearly enjoying this moment. Let me help you understand something. The woman you have been mocking all week is not just any sniper. She holds the record for the longest confirmed kill shot by a SEAL in the entire Iraq and Afghanistan campaigns. Hartley's eyes widened. Sarah shot Rodriguez a look that said stop talking. But Rodriguez was on a roll now. She has trained more than half the SEAL snipers currently operating in special operations. Rodriguez continued. When new snipers graduate from training, They request to serve with her because they know they will learn more in 6 months with Lieutenant Commander Chen than they would in 5 years with anyone else. Rodriguez, Sarah said in a warning tone, but Rodriguez was not done. There was a mission in Kandahar. Taliban fighters had an entire company of Marines pinned down. The Marines were taking casualties and could not move. Sarah was positioned on a mountain ridge more than 1,600 yards away. The wind was crazy. The heat was causing mirage effects that made seeing the target almost impossible. Command told her the shot was too difficult, told her to wait for air support. Rodriguez, that is enough, Sarah said more firmly. But Hartley leaned forward. What happened? Rodriguez smiled. She made the shot anyway. Took out the enemy machine gun position with 1 bullet. Then she took out 2 more targets in the next 30 seconds. The Marines were able to move and get their wounded to safety. She saved at least 20 lives that day, probably more. The room was silent. Sarah had returned to cleaning her rifle, her jaw tight. She did not like her combat record being discussed like entertainment. Those missions had been about saving lives, about doing a job, not about glory or recognition. There is more, Rodriguez said. A mission in Yemen. A hostage situation. 2 American aid workers being held by terrorists. Sarah was part of the rescue team. She was positioned outside the building, providing overwatch. The terrorists started executing hostages. She had to take a shot through a window at night with her team moving inside the building. One mistake would have meant hitting one of her own teammates. Stop, Sarah said sharply. These are classified operations. You should not be discussing them. Rodriguez held up his hands. Sorry, Lieutenant Commander, but the Sergeant Major here needs to understand who he has been disrespecting all week. Hartley's face had gone red, but it was not anger. It was shame. Deep, genuine shame. He looked at Sarah with new eyes now, seeing not a woman who did not belong, but a warrior who had proven herself in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. I owe you an apology, Hartley said quietly. A serious one. Sarah continued her work. What you owe me is to treat people based on what they can do, not what you assume they cannot do. You are right, Hartley said. I was wrong. Completely wrong. I let my prejudices control my judgment. I disrespected a fellow soldier. I disrespected someone who has served with distinction and courage. There is no excuse for what I did. This was different from other apologies Sarah had received over the years. Most men only apologized when they were forced to, when a superior officer ordered them to make things right. But Hartley sounded genuinely sorry. He sounded like someone who had realized he had been wrong and wanted to make it right. Apology accepted, Sarah said. She finally looked up from her rifle. But understand this, Sergeant Major. I did not come here to prove anything to you or anyone else. I came here to train. I came here to learn from British methods and to share what I know. That is all. I do not need to prove I belong. I know I belong. Your opinion does not change that. Hartley nodded slowly. Fair enough. But if you are willing, I would like to learn from you. Teach me what you know. Sarah studied him for a moment. She had learned to read people quickly in her career. You had to in combat situations. You had to know who you could trust, who was genuine and who was just saying what they thought you wanted to hear. Looking at Hartley now, she believed he was being honest. All right, she said. Tomorrow morning, meet me on the range at 0500. Before the official training starts, I will show you some techniques I have developed. I will be there, Hartley said. He stood up looking like he wanted to say more but not knowing what to say. Finally, he just nodded and left. When he was gone, Rodriguez let out a low whistle. Well, that was interesting. Think he learned his lesson? Maybe, Sarah said. Time will tell. You know you do not have to help him, right? After the way he treated you? Sarah thought about that. It would have been easy to hold a grudge, to let Hartley struggle and feel bad about his behavior. But that was not who she was. She had not fought so hard to become a SEAL just to prove people wrong. Sarah was up at 4:30 the next morning, just like every other day. She dressed in her training uniform and grabbed her rifle case. The base was still dark and quiet as she walked to the shooting range. Most soldiers were still asleep. They would not start morning physical training for another hour and a half. When she reached the range, she was surprised to see Hartley already there. He was standing by the equipment shed, his rifle case at his feet, 2 cups of steaming coffee in his hands. When he saw her approaching, he held one out. Thought you might want this, he said. Cold morning. Sarah accepted the coffee. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. In the military, coffee was more than just a drink. It was a peace offering, a sign of respect. "Thank you," she said. They walked to the 500-yard range in silence. Sarah set up her equipment while Hartley watched. She moved with practiced efficiency, each action precise and purposeful. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was rushed. "First thing you need to understand," Sarah said as she set up her rifle, "is that great shooting is not about strength. It is not about being big or having powerful muscles. It is about control, about making your body completely still, about turning yourself into a stable platform for the rifle." Hartley nodded, listening carefully. "Watch," Sarah said. She got into position behind her rifle. Most shooters tense up when they shoot. They grip the rifle too hard. They hold their breath and create tension in their shoulders and chest. That tension causes tiny movements that throw off the shot. She demonstrated, her body settling into the shooting position like water finding its level. You have to relax. Let the rifle rest naturally. Support it rather than fighting it. Your breathing has to be controlled but not forced. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, naturally and calmly. When your body is relaxed, your heart rate drops. When your heart rate drops, you become steadier. For the next hour, Sarah taught Hartley techniques she had developed over years of combat experience. She showed him how to read wind not just by looking at flags but by feeling it on his skin. She taught him micro-adjustments for urban environments where buildings created unpredictable wind patterns. She explained her method for rapid target acquisition, the ability to spot a threat and engage it in seconds rather than minutes. Hartley was a good student. He listened carefully and asked intelligent questions. He tried each technique, making mistakes at first but improving with each attempt. Sarah could see that he was genuinely skilled. He had years of experience and good instincts. He just needed refinement. "Why are you helping me?" Hartley asked during a break. "After the way I treated you?" Sarah looked at him directly. "Because you asked. Because you were honest about being wrong. And because holding grudges takes energy that I would rather use for other things. I do not deserve this." "Probably not," Sarah agreed. "But this is not about what you deserve. It is about making both of us better. In combat, I might need to depend on you someday. Or you might need to depend on me. When that happens, I want to know that you are the best you can be. Personal feelings do not matter when lives are on the line." Hartley was quiet for a moment. "You are right. Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. Call me Sarah when we are training like this. Ranks just get in the way." By the time the official morning training started, other soldiers were arriving at the range. They saw Sarah and Hartley training together and exchanged curious glances. Word had spread about Sarah's perfect shot the day before. Everyone was talking about it. Some soldiers looked at her with new respect. Others seemed uncertain about how to treat her now. The next several days followed a new pattern. Sarah and Hartley would meet early in the morning before official training to work on techniques. Then they would join the rest of the group for the regular program. During official training, Sarah began to participate more actively. She no longer held back or deliberately underperformed. The change was dramatic. When Sarah shot at full ability, she was clearly the best sniper in the program. Her shots were consistently more accurate than anyone else's. Her speed was faster. Her calculations were more precise. It was not even close, but she was not arrogant about it. She helped other soldiers when they asked for advice. She shared techniques freely. She treated everyone with respect, regardless of how they had treated her before. Slowly, the atmosphere in the program began to change. Some of the British soldiers who had laughed at Hartley's early comments now felt embarrassed. A few came to Sarah privately to apologize. She accepted their apologies gracefully and offered to help them improve their shooting if they wanted. One afternoon, during a particularly difficult training exercise, a young British corporal was struggling. He had missed the target 3 times in a row and was getting frustrated. Sarah walked over to him. "Mind if I watch your next shot?" she asked. The corporal looked nervous but nodded. Sarah stood behind him and observed as he prepared to shoot. She could see the problem immediately. He was anticipating the recoil, tensing his shoulder a fraction of a second before pulling the trigger. That tiny movement was throwing off his aim. "You are flinching," Sarah said gently. "Right before you shoot, watch." She demonstrated the problem, then showed him the correct technique. "Trust the rifle. Trust your training. The recoil will happen, but you do not need to prepare for it. Just let it happen naturally." The corporal tried again, this time focusing on staying relaxed. The shot hit the target dead center. His face lit up with surprise and joy. I did it. I actually did it. You did, Sarah confirmed. Remember that feeling. That is what shooting should feel like. Calm, controlled, natural. Moments like this happened repeatedly over the following days. Sarah became not just a participant in the program, but an informal instructor. Soldiers from both American and British units sought her advice. She never refused. She helped everyone who asked, sharing knowledge that she had earned through years of hard experience. Hartley noticed the change in how others treated Sarah. One evening, as they were cleaning their rifles together, he brought it up. You have earned their respect, he said, all of them. Even the ones who doubted you at first. Respect has to be earned, Sarah replied. It cannot be demanded or given. You earn it by your actions. I learned something important this week, Hartley said. I learned that my assumptions were based on nothing. I assumed you could not be as good as the men here because of your size, because of your gender. But none of that matters. What matters is skill, dedication, experience, and you have more of all three than almost anyone I have met. Almost, Sarah said with a slight smile. Hartley laughed. All right, more than anyone I have met. Is that better? Much better. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Hartley spoke again. Can I ask you something personal? Sarah looked up from her rifle. You can ask. I might not answer. Why did you become a SEAL? It must have been incredibly difficult. Not just the training, but dealing with all the people who did not want you there. Why put yourself through that? Sarah thought about how to answer. It was a question she had been asked many times, though usually in a more hostile way, but Hartley was asking genuinely, trying to understand. When I was a kid, she said slowly, I watched a documentary about Navy SEALs. I saw what they did, the missions they completed, the people they saved, the difference they made, and I thought that is what I want to do. I want to serve. I want to be part of something important. She paused, remembering. Everyone told me it was impossible. My parents said girls could not be SEALs. My teachers said I was too small. My friends said I was crazy. But I did not care what people said was impossible. I cared about what I wanted to do, so I worked toward it, every single day. It must have been hard, Hartley said. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, Sarah admitted. But as training broke me down in ways I did not know I could be broken. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, mornings when I did not think I could get out of bed, days when quitting seemed like the only reasonable option. But you did not quit. No, because quitting would have meant they were right. All the people who said I could not do it would have been proven correct, and I was not willing to give them that satisfaction. So you did it out of spite? Hartley asked with a small smile. Sarah smiled back. At first, maybe. But eventually it became about more than that. It became about proving something to myself, about discovering what I was truly capable of, about becoming the best version of myself that I could be. Hartley nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand now. And I think I owe you another apology. You already apologized, I know, but I need to say this. I did not just underestimate your abilities. I disrespected everything you worked for. I dismissed years of sacrifice and dedication without knowing anything about you. That was wrong on a deeper level than I first realized. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. She could see that he truly understood now. This was not just about her making a good shot or proving she could keep up with the men. This was about recognizing the journey she had taken, the obstacles she had overcome, the price she had paid to be here. Thank you, she said simply. That means more than you know. They finished cleaning their rifles and packed up their equipment. As they walked back to their quarters together, they talked about techniques and strategies. The second week of the program began with a new intensity. The soldiers had completed the basic training and evaluation. Now they would face the final challenge, a team-based competition that would test everything they had learned. The instructors gathered everyone in the briefing room on Monday morning. The British major stood at the front with several maps spread on the table behind him. For the final exercise, he explained, you will work in pairs, 1 American and 1 British soldier per team. You will be given a series of tactical scenarios that simulate real combat situations. Each team will be scored on accuracy, speed, communication, and tactical decision-making. He paused and looked around the room. This is not just about individual skill. This is about working together. In real operations, you often have to coordinate with forces from other nations. This exercise will test your ability to do that effectively. The instructors began announcing the team pairings. Sarah waited, wondering who she would be matched with. When her name was called, she was not surprised by the result. Lieutenant Commander Chen will be paired with Sergeant Major Hartley. There were knowing looks exchanged among the soldiers. Everyone had noticed the change in Hartley over the past week. His early mockery had transformed into genuine respect. He and Sarah had trained together every morning. They had developed a working relationship built on mutual understanding. If the instructors wanted to see effective teamwork, this pairing made sense. Hartley caught Sarah's eye across the room and gave a small nod. She nodded back. They did not need words. They both understood what was expected and what they needed to do. The first scenario was set up on the long-range facility. Each team would be given coordinates for multiple targets at varying distances from 300 to 1,200 yards. The targets would appear randomly, and teams would have to identify them, calculate the shots, and engage them as quickly and accurately as possible. Points would be awarded for hits with bonus points for speed. Sarah and Hartley were third to go. They watched the first two teams carefully, noting their strategies and their mistakes. The first team was too slow, taking too much time on calculations. The second team was fast but missed several targets because they rushed their shots. When it was their turn, Sarah and Hartley moved to the firing line together. They had discussed their strategy that morning during their early training session. They would divide the targets based on distance and positioning. Sarah would take the longer shots where her exceptional skill gave them an advantage. Hartley would handle the mid-range targets where his experience made him very effective. "Ready?" Hartley asked quietly. "Ready," Sarah confirmed. The exercise began. The first target appeared at 400 yards. Hartley spotted it immediately. "I have it." 400 yards, slight left wind. His shot hit the target cleanly. 3 seconds total. The next target popped up at 900 yards. "Mine," Sarah said calmly. She had already calculated the wind and elevation in her head. Her shot was immediate. Dead center hit. 4 seconds. They moved through the course like this, communicating in short, efficient phrases. They did not waste time. They did not second-guess each other. Each knew their role and executed it perfectly. When Sarah called a shot, Hartley trusted her completely. When Hartley engaged a target, Sarah was already scanning for the next one. The final target appeared at 1,200 yards, the longest shot of the exercise. The wind was gusting strongly, making it extremely difficult. Sarah settled into position while Hartley read the wind flags and called out the conditions. Wind gusting left to right, estimate 8 to 10 miles per hour. Temperature dropped 2 degrees in the last minute. Cold air at this distance. Sarah made her adjustments based on Hartley's information. She trusted his observations completely. Her breathing slowed. Her finger found the trigger. The shot was perfect. Even the instructors watching through spotting scopes seemed impressed. When the scores were announced, Sarah and Hartley had the fastest time and the highest accuracy. They had beaten the second-place team by a significant margin. Several soldiers clapped appreciatively. Even the instructors looked pleased. The second scenario was more complex. Each team was given a tactical situation based on real combat experiences. They had to decide on a shooting position, account for various obstacles and environmental factors, and engage multiple targets while under time pressure. This tested not just shooting skills but tactical thinking and communication. Sarah and Hartley approached the problem methodically. They discussed the scenario, debated different approaches, and came to a decision together. Neither tried to dominate the conversation. Neither dismissed the other's ideas. They worked as true partners. During the execution, a problem occurred. Sarah's rifle had a malfunction. The bolt did not seat properly after a shot. In a real combat situation, this could be deadly, but Sarah remained calm. She cleared the malfunction in seconds while Hartley continued engaging targets, covering her while she fixed the problem. They did not panic. They adapted. Despite the malfunction, they still placed first in the scenario. The instructors noted in their evaluation that the team had shown exceptional composure under unexpected pressure. Over the next 3 days, the exercises continued. Each one was more challenging than the last. Urban environment scenarios where buildings blocked wind patterns, night shooting exercises with limited visibility, moving target drills that required split-second decisions. Physical challenges that tested endurance while maintaining shooting accuracy. Through it all, Sarah and Hartley performed consistently. They won some exercises outright. They placed in the top 3 in all of them. More importantly, they demonstrated the kind of seamless teamwork that military leaders valued above individual heroics. Other teams began to study how Sarah and Hartley worked together. They noticed the efficient communication. They saw how each trusted the other completely. They observed how disagreements were handled with discussion rather than argument. It became a masterclass in effective partnership. On the final day, the instructors announced one last challenge. This would be the culminating exercise that would determine the overall winner of the program. It would combine every skill they had learned and tested everything they had practiced. The scenario was complex. Each team would move through a course that simulated a real combat operation. There would be physical obstacles, tactical decisions, and multiple shooting stations at various ranges. The targets would be mixed, some stationary and some moving, some obvious and some partially concealed. Teams would be scored on everything, from accuracy to decision-making to physical endurance to how well they communicated under stress. "This is it," Rodriguez said to Sarah before the exercise began. "Everything you have worked for this week comes down to this. Every day comes down to the moment you are in," Sarah replied. "This is just another moment." Sarah and Hartley prepared their equipment in silence. They had done this so many times now that words were unnecessary. Each knew what the other needed. Each anticipated what the other would do. They had become a true team. The exercise began. They moved through the course efficiently, navigating obstacles while keeping their rifles secure and ready. At the first shooting station, 3 targets appeared at different ranges. They engaged them in perfect coordination. No wasted shots, no hesitation. The course continued with increasing difficulty. Physical barriers that required climbing while carrying full gear. A river crossing that tested their ability to keep equipment dry and functional. Mental challenges where they had to calculate complex ballistics problems under time pressure. At one station, they faced a moral dilemma built into the scenario. They had to identify which targets were legitimate threats and which were innocent civilians. Many teams in earlier training had failed this type of test, shooting too quickly without properly identifying targets. Sarah and Hartley took an extra 3 seconds to make sure. They engaged only the correct targets. They passed the test. Halfway through the course, they were in first place. But the second half was even more demanding. The shooting stations became harder. The ranges increased. The targets became smaller and harder to spot. The physical challenges intensified. There was a moment when both were exhausted. They had been moving for over an hour through difficult terrain, carrying heavy equipment, shooting from multiple positions. They reached a particularly challenging shooting station, where they had to engage 5 targets in rapid succession at varying ranges, while standing on an unstable platform. Hartley shot first. He hit 3 of 5 targets. Not bad considering the difficulty, but not perfect. Sarah went next. She was tired. Her muscles ached. Her breathing was heavy from the physical exertion. These were not ideal shooting conditions, but Sarah had trained for moments like this. In real combat, you were never fresh and rested. You were always tired, stressed, operating under the worst possible conditions. That was when your training mattered most. She forced her breathing to slow. She ignored the burning in her legs and shoulders. She let her training take over. 5 shots, 5 hits, all center mass. Even tired, even under pressure, her skill was undeniable. "Bloody hell," Hartley muttered with a mix of exhaustion and admiration. "How do you do that?" "Practice," Sarah said simply. "Lots and lots of practice."